Welcome to Notion. We're super excited to have you here. I know it's a crazy week in New York this week, Tech Week, and you're with us. So we appreciate you coming here. I'm Anastasia. I run all things startups at Notion. I'm based in San Francisco, so I'm always super excited to come here and meet our New York community. So welcome again. I usually do a quick poll of the room so we all know and our panel knows how to adjust our conversation. How many of you are currently chiefs of staff? Amazing. Maybe aspiring and want to do, that's something that you would want to do. Maybe kind of in the middle and like, I'm not sure, depending how today's conversation goes. Amazing. And about the size of the companies, like, is it more on the startup side? How many of you are working in the startups? Smaller. Okay, what about the scale ups? Maybe like 50 plus, 100 plus. Cool. My favorite question, how many of you are familiar with Notion or using Notion? Love that.
Wow.
Well, there's a few people that didn't raise their hand. I know maybe you're just shy or maybe you just haven't used Notion. For those that haven't used Notion, think of Notion as an AI workspace that works for you. Help you automate your workflows, build your projects, managing your task. Now take your notes for you as well. So everything that's happening in one workspace. But I think without further ado, I'm super excited that we are partnering with an amazing community as the Chief of Staff and Clara. And let's give a huge round of applause to our panel. We have an amazing talent on the panel tonight. We have Skillit, Morning Brew, Notion, and Wagmo. So let's take our seats and start the conversations.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Anastasia, and a huge thank you to Notion for hosting us here for all the food and drink. And I hope everyone got a tote bag so you can show everybody that you were here tonight. So Anastasia already started polling some of us. I would love to poll us a little bit more. You know, here in New York, we love polls. So how many of you are currently using AI in your daily workflows? Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT? Okay, amazing. And how many of you are specifically using Notion AI in your workflows? A couple of people. Okay, great. We love to see that. So today we are going to be talking about AI in the Chief of Staff's Toolkit. Quick introduction on myself. My name is Clara. I'm the founder and CEO of Ask a Chief of Staff. Ooh. We are a platform dedicated to empowering chiefs of staff. So whether you're landing your first role or second, or you are looking to succeed in the role, or you're figuring out what's next, we can help you with that through community, coaching, and education. So without further ado, I'd love for our panelists to introduce themselves, your name, where you work, what your company does, and the size and stage of your company as well.
Sure. You looked at me, so I'm assuming that's my signal to start. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Stacy Oentero. I am a hybrid chief of staff and VP of operations at Skillit. Skillit is a AI-powered labor marketplace for industrial, civil, and commercial contractors. So think essentially a LinkedIn for construction companies. We are a seed stage company based in New York City.
Awesome. Is this working? Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel H. Chung. I'm the Chief of Staff to the CEO at Wagmo. I love that there are very few totes left. And so I know that there are dog and cat pet parents out there. So I appreciate that. So Wagmo is a leading pet benefit that sells our pet benefit to employers so that you all that are working at employers can actually get access to pet wellness and pet insurance plans. We actually are so good that we increase the retention and satisfaction of employees, which is really incredible. The size of the company is about 40 people right now. And before being chief of staff, I spent a lot of my career in tech, primarily in product and product design. Happy to talk about transitions afterwards and anything chief of staff.
Howdy, I'm Marisa, and I support our chief people officer at Notion. Y'all know what Notion is, so I'm not gonna dig deep into that one. I do wish I brought my dogs though, and I'm sorry, but next time we'll do a dog date. Notion is just shy of 1,000 employees, and excited to hear more from these folks and how they're using AI and share a little bit more around how we use it, Notion AI every day.
Sweet. Great to be with you all. My name is Kyle Hagge. I'm Chief of Staff at Morning Brew. How many people know Morning Brew? Raise your hands. All right. Yes, there we go. Huge. We're a digital media publisher. We own and operate 20 franchises. Most people know our flagship newsletter. It goes out every day to about 4.2 million people. Or Morning Brew Daily Show, the podcast, which is one of our more popular franchises. But we also do industry publications. So CFO Brew, Marketing Brew, HR Brew, for example, where we write for a specific function or a specific audience. And then we have several other franchises too. One is called Good Work with Dan Toomey. If you like people that are absolutely hilarious, Dan is like one of the funniest people I know. So if you haven't seen those videos, go to YouTube, type in Good Work, and you'll enjoy it a lot. And Clara and Notion, thanks for having us. I'm really excited for the conversation.
Amazing. So as you can see, we have chiefs of staff at all sizes and stages of companies, which I think will make the conversation here super interesting. So first and foremost, we'll just go down the line here. I would love to know some of the tools that are absolutely essential in your day-to-day. I'm going to have you keep it to 3 because I know there's a lot of tools in the toolkit, but Stacy, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, I feel like I have to pay homage to like the people hosting us here. So Notion AI, but in all honesty, Notion is a great repository and like basically our kind of home base and dashboarding system. So it's really how I manage kind of like what we do on a day-to-day basis and kind of like the knowledge center of everything Skillit related, and even like how investors show like how they look at our progress month over month, which is super awesome. So thank you, Notion team. Aside from that, I think the big one that I've been experimenting a lot with that I've really loved is Granola. It's an awesome note taker that just doesn't, I don't know if any chiefs feel this way, but like sometimes there's like 50 note takers and I hate that you have to admit every single one of them. It's like, who are these freaking, but Granola just exists on your side and, it basically summarizes your notes without being pervasive. And the last one, not necessarily fully AI, but like there is AI technology built into it, but Asana. Fantastic task manager, automates a lot of our functions, works really well with Notion. So yeah, those are top 3 for me.
For me, I also use Granola, but the other note taker that I love is Fathom. If you want to admit a lot of different note takers to your room, Fathom I honestly found is like the most accurate when it comes to note taking output. So one of my first projects when I came to Wagmo was actually to choose a note taker for Wagmo. And I essentially at one point had 11 different note takers and Rachel in the meeting, which was too much, but it helped me understand like what are the different outputs and actually choose the one that was right for us. Yeah. So I'd say that. I also, for my LLM, I use ChatGPT. And the third one I would say is I love Superhuman. It is like the only way that I can get back to inbox 0 at the end of the day. So highly recommend.
Okay, so for work, I use Notion AI and Notion AI. In every surface for generation, for analysis. I don't write any of my own Google formulas anymore. Just like very complex Google formulas. Meeting notes now, because that just launched. And then a little bit more complex, like building and deep research. Actually, our head of people just left and we just had a new one come on. And in that transition, to your point, it's been really helpful. We have so much documentation because we do so much within and we write down so much. Everything is written down. Maybe too many things are written down. But it's been really helpful to basically pull like deep research reports and helping her scale up on new topics. It's like we have a conversation coming up, a certain meeting or a certain deep dive, and I'll just have it basically put together like a prep doc because I can only think in bullet points. But sometimes bullet points are not enough to convey the complexity or the nuances of what's happening. So that's what I found really valuable recently.
For me, +1 to Granola. It is probably the tool I've tried in the past year that's felt the most like magical. It reminds me of like the tools you are like, oh my God, like how is it this good? So if you have not tried Granola, it's like the AI note taker for people in back-to-back meetings. I know Notion AI has a Granola clone that is also quite good. So if you already have Notion, you can get it with Notion too. But Granola was magical. The second tool I use is like I'm a Claude power user and I haven't got max yet. I haven't shilled out the $100 a month, but I pay $20 a month for Pro and it just got the beta for deep research. And that is like absolutely phenomenal. It's another like magical feeling I've gotten with technology recently. And then the third one, this is maybe embarrassing, but Morning Brew runs on like Google Sheets to a degree that is like almost scary and maybe something we ought to fix. But we like are a Google power user of a company. And, this will come up during the conversation, but I do think a lot of these like AI solutions are solutions in search of a problem. And for a lot of stuff, like Google Sheets, like gets the job done. And you have to be like significantly better than Google Sheets for us to change. So we are evaluating a lot of new technology, but sometimes like the classics are the best.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think it's really cool to see, even at a larger stage of company or a later stage of company, sometimes simple is best, right? There's no need to try a new tool just because it exists. Kyle, you actually teed me up for my next question, so I'm going to swing it back to you.
Yeah, please do.
But when you're looking at new tools, what are things that have felt kind of gimmicky in the AI space? And what are things that are features that you see in tools that make you actually decide, okay, we're going to use this?
Yeah, I think going back to what I just said, and I wouldn't even say AI, I would just say like when you're assessing any technology, I think it's really important to understand like what problem you're trying to solve for the business. And I think right now, like there is just so much hype around AI and there's so much funding going in that the options you have of different technology you could bring in are pretty much infinite. And you can waste a lot of time getting caught up in like the sexiness of like, oh, we need to be using AI without saying like, okay, but first, like what problems are we actually going to solve with this? And so I think that is step one. And then I just think like anything, is this a problem that we can solve with people? Is this a problem that we can solve with a better process? Or is this a problem that we can solve with technology? And at this point, like every company that's ever existed now has AI integrated into it. Like HubSpot is a perfect example. I don't think people think of HubSpot as an AI company, but like they definitely use AI and they probably use it better than like half of these new companies that say they're all about AI. And so a lot of the value you're going to get from AI is actually understanding how to properly use the tools you already have in place, as opposed to going to find a new tool, training your whole team on that. Like, are you actually using the tools you have currently? So we're trying to maximize the value of what we have in-house. And then the second thing we're doing is we're building our own AI models that are trained on our like first-party proprietary data, because that's where we think we have an edge. Like all of the people that are using the same models, unless you're feeding them unique data to your company, like they're not really an advantage. For us, because we're in a newsletter business primarily, we have probably the richest first-party data of like any media company out there. And so how can we train models that just our internal teams use on that data to give us really interesting insights? So that's a project we've been starting for probably 6 months or so.
Amazing. And then Rachel, I'm going to punt this to you since you tried 11 different note takers. What were you evaluating?
Sounds like a personal hell of mine. Yeah.
Yeah,
What were
same.
you evaluating?
Very comprehensive when it
Yeah.
comes to evaluating things. What was I evaluating in the note takers? And so I would tell you, does anybody use Fathom in the audience? Okay, Fathom's UI, UX, I would not say it's the most beautiful. So I was purely evaluating it based off of the output. And so I wanted to see like if I actually looked at the notes, like was it concise enough for actually my principal, my CEO to actually grok really quickly? Because I found that a lot of platforms actually outputted something that was so long that like no one would actually read the output. And then I was also just looking for accuracy. And so when I was reading through the Fathom notes, I was like, these are actually notes that I would take myself and use that as a kind of a caliber of like, what do I actually want here? When I was looking at, I do really like granola, and so I'm not going to put shame to that. But granola, you really have to train it for the output that you actually want and the structure that you want. I use it a lot actually for recruiting, and so whenever I'm doing an interview, I find it very awkward to have a note taker in the room, and so I'll have granola there. And I'll have to actually train them of like, this is an interview, this is actually the questions that I'm asking, this is the output that I want to have, so you can actually parse the strengths and weaknesses, and so I can actually have a fast synthesis of what happened.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of kind of overlap in, at the end of the day, it's what is the problem, right, that you're trying to solve? And for you, you had a really great bar of what it had to meet in order for it to be a good tool, or maybe it becomes a problem that you can solve with people over tools. So thank you for that.
I will say, sorry. So sure, yes, very smart, intelligent answers. I will say at the same time, I think we're at a space where we also want to create some space for curiosity and learning and testing. So like going into 11 different tools, maybe you don't want to do that for every single time the next time.
I do not
You're
recommend.
not again. But like, I bet there was something like actually really interesting in the way that you were able to like level up your understanding of the space or your curiosity of like what is possible. And that's where I think there's something to be said of like, it's not wasted time, but I do think it's important to create some space to try and like for no purposes of productivity. It's just a space to like open up your mind. So I think that's really important as well. In addition to like at the end of the day, like what are you going to put dollars against? I think that's when your decision set gets a lot more methodical, which I do appreciate, and first principles approach. But I think there's a principle around like open up your mind.
I totally agree. And I think there's actually like maybe more pressure now if you're like leading a department, because there have been like technological innovations that have made things that like you probably weren't possible 10 years ago. Now they are possible. So if you are stuck with this, like, I know what is possible and that isn't possible, so we're going to do this other thing, you're going to miss something pretty remarkable. So I totally agree. Like staying open-minded, staying curious, more important now than ever, because new things are possible every single day.
Yeah, I know that Marisa and I were talking about this kind of wide open space that when you are trying out new AI tools, when you're trying out any new technology, you want to have that curiosity to see what is possible. And sometimes that starts with being a little silly, right? I remember when I first started using ChatGPT, I would be like, based off of my horoscope, what job would I be best suited for? Didn't like the answers, but you know, it was a good experience to try it.
And that's also like, if anybody's thinking about like, oh, well, how do I think about like upskilling my organization or the folks around me? It's actually part of the approach that our L&D team is taking internally. So like there's some Notion people here. So you don't know this is launching soon. So like cover your ears or like be surprised when you hear it. But they're taking this approach of like tinker and play and exploration as just like this foundational component. There'll be more progression overall around like, well, how do we rethink? How do we have certain business processes or like solve certain challenges or like have it more integrated. But like that foundational step is really actually built around like play and exploring and just like having a bit of fun.
So to follow up on that, after you've had the fun and you've tried a couple of things, and I think this question is maybe especially pertinent to you, and Stacy, I'd love to go to you next. But once you've started to play around with these tools, you've started to design some systems around it. How do you get the buy-in from your team and specifically your principal, since you have a new principal, to actually go and use these things that you've built?
I'd say, so I'll start bottoms up, which is the easy point. And the principle here, I think we're all thinking about it so much and like being on the forefront and wanting to have it integrated deeply into our product, serving our users and customers in really valuable ways that people use. So like huge push there. So that is inspiring the conversation for ourselves. So I think that piece around like the buy-in, it's totally there. If anything, it's more around like, how do we get it faster? How do we do it faster? I think there's a sense of like really, really strong urgency. The buy-in on the team, I think, is interesting. The way that we're approaching it is really similar to you, is like basically for like the people team specifically, I'll say, and then this is also how we're partially going to scale it across the business. So again, Notino is like new. Is it was basically like in 3 or 4 hours doing a bit of a discovery. So it's like 2 hours of a deep dive with like the subject matter expertise for somebody on the team. So I'll take recruiting, for example. We went really deep with recruiting and basically partnered with them and said, over the course of like 2 hours, let's just have an open conversation around the first principle. What is the most important thing in recruiting that we want our recruiters to do? We want them to be able to like identify, qualify, nurture, and close candidates. Like that's what we really want their engagement on. Let's go through every part of the funnel from their experience, the candidate experience, and the manager experience, that anything that happens in the touch point that takes away from that intent. And that's where we started the conversation. So it's very much around like those first principles. And then as we went through that, having the conversation around, okay, well, how do we address this? How do we use new AI? In our instance, our barometer for a new tool is actually like, if Notion AI can do like 80% of it, then we don't do a new tool and we'll just be happy with the 80% answer. So I think that to answer your question, like that's the experience we went through and now we're executing against that. But like that discovery session of understanding what is the core, what do we want to stay the same or to remain true? And then think, okay, well, what are all the pieces around that make that difficult? That piece was helpful in reframing where is it that we still want to spend time and energy? What is unique to us? What is that experience? What are the things that take away from that? Because that's just like a logical progression. Like the example with HubSpot, even we were talking about earlier, like with workflows and automation, like that just helps elevate the quality and output that we can provide. And I think that framing the conversation in that way of like the jobs to be done and how do we continue to create really high quality and output and a really exceptional like candidate experience and qualification experience, like that helps the rest of it just make a ton of sense.
Yeah, Stacy, same question. I would love to know what that looks like at a much smaller environment where maybe you are creating the systems in the first place. There aren't as many decision makers or stakeholders before you go in and implement this new system.
Yeah, that's great. How many of the chiefs of staff here are like in an org that's less than 25? Less than 50? More than 50? Okay. All right. It's kind of like an equal divide between each. So I would say that like, whether it's a rhythm, a tool, a system, like whatever it is that you're trying to implement, I'm actually going to piggyback of what Kyle said. It's like always figuring out what the problem you're trying to solve together is, but also aside from that, it's like building the currency of trust between you and your principal, one, and then you and your team. I think that a big part of tool acquisition that gets very quickly rejected across any size of a team is putting the tool first without really being able to address what is the pain point that we're all trying to solve for together. Because I think a big part of being a chief of staff is having the wisdom and discernment and this noise of like, honestly, this age of just noise of like everybody needs to use AI. Everyone has an allocation of budget to try AI tools, et cetera. It's really figuring out what your strengths are as a team and then building around that to be able to strengthen them. So it's like if, for example, I'm going to use a military analogy, which is so unlike me because I know nothing about the military, but like try to follow this metaphor with me as I try to be creative in my chief of staff kind of dream here. But it's like, when you're a part of the military, it's like you're kind of like training your physical body first, right? So whatever it is, the core competency, whether you're an ops, an engineer, whatever it is that you're doing, you have to be good at the core function first. And then anything else that you see weakness around, that's where I would say you would fortify that with like tools, systems, and processes in place. And then being able to make sure that they understand what the point of the tool is. So if you give somebody a shield, you better explain to them what the point of that shield is and what it's going to do for them in the battlefront. And so in the same way with, I think, systems and processes, I think in an early stage, one thing to caution is to overly process everything or to overly automate things, because in the stage that we're a 6-person team. There's a lot that requires a lot of agility. And I think for a lot of ops people and like chiefs of staff, that might cause frustration because things move very quickly. So in the same way that you're implementing systems, it might work this week, but it might not work in 2 weeks because you realize in 2 weeks, you doubled the amount of customers you have, or you doubled the size of your marketplace. And so a big part of like, I would say fundamentally the way that we design systems, or I've tried to do it, is to hold everything with an open hand. Because at the end of the day, I think our responsibility being people working in tech, assuming that everybody works in tech, is that the kind of like the heart is innovation. So you have to move as quickly as everything else and to make sure that like you are learning as much as you can, but also that you are being very like you can stay convicted. If you think that at the moment everything is humming along great and you can fix a different problem, i.e. product market fit, selling your product, don't focus so much on what everyone else, what the media is trying to tell you to focus on, and instead be true to the conviction of what your stage of company is and what your mission is. Because every industry will treat AI very differently and adopt it very differently. Every stage will treat it very differently because at the end of the day, AI is going to be the new SaaS. Like you're going to suddenly have a million things at your disposal, but your job is as a chief of staff, like honestly, at some point you have to have some fiscal responsibility around it, right? Like make sure that your bottom line stays healthy in this process, but also that the tools are working for you and that you're not being dictated around the systems, tools, et cetera. So agility, building trust with the org.
Yeah, I'm reading between the lines here, and I think this is a really key point about being a chief of staff is this high level of discernment, right? Like there's a lot of information that's coming at you, whether it's tools, whether it's news, whether it's the political climate or economic climate, and you need to be able to filter a lot of that in order to make good decisions and also to filter information up to your principal so that they can make good decisions too. So I want to move a little bit to automation and how you're using some of that. So Rachel, I'm going to start with you. Any automations that you've used through AI or other tools that have really helped you in your day-to-day workflow, especially working with your principal?
Yes, I will speak to two examples that I think will be quite salient here. And actually, to build on the previous question too, let me tell you about our RFP tool that I built and then how we kind of expanded beyond there. But essentially, what happened was it was like Friday at 1 p.m. and like the CEO pings me and she's like, it's an emergency. We have an RFP that's really important. That's one of our largest. That's due in 4 hours. And we've been working on it all week and it's not up to par. And at this point, the CEO, the COO, the VP of sales, and the AE have worked on it all week. And so if you imagine that, that is dozens and dozens of hours of very expensive time being used for this one request for proposal. And so at the 11th hour, I came in, there's 4 hours left, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to go through this like 1,000-line spreadsheet and actually answer every single row and check for content, check for spelling errors. And like, this is the last thing I want to do on a Friday on emergency. It did suck. And so I was like, on the Monday that came afterwards, I was like, I am never going to do that again. And so I essentially I used a GPT and I built one that was trained on our best RFP to date. And I told it about the formatting. And basically what I did after that is showed the sales team the tool. And I was like, hey, now you can put any RFP template that you get in this tool and out pops like a completed RFP. And so kind of looping back to the previous question, why I think it's relatable here is really, I think the most valuable thing you can do to have your team adopt AI is actually just show them, just don't tell them to use AI. It's just like, here's a tool for you. Like, why don't you go try it? Because honestly, if you built it in the right way, like, or even like in a little bit of a way, they'll be able to see the value. And AEs like have consistently used this tool to this day, has unlocked hours of their time. And now there's even budget actually unlocked so that we actually invested in a real RFP AI tool called OneUp, if anybody is curious about the tool. And so that was one really helpful story. The other one that I did that was based off of an annoying task is every single day at 4 p.m. My CEO is an amazing, very, very early morning riser. I am not. She wakes up at 5 a.m. every day. And so at 4 p.m., she is exhausted. She talks to me and she's like, can you read my emails? And I'm like, I need to polish your emails. And it was not my favorite time of day. I was like, every single day at 4 p.m., she would ask me to read them. And so I essentially was like, I cannot do this anymore as my job. And I also am being interrupted in my flow. I was like doing something very strategic. And so I built a GPT that was based off of our brand guidelines and then also trained on her tone of voice. So anything is kind of scary. Anything that outputted from that GPT sounded like Christy. And so I gave that GPT to her. And since that day, I swear to you, she has not once asked me to read an email, and it has been absolutely glorious. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That is 100% like the way that I spent. So how many folks here, is anybody here like ghostwrite comms? Yeah, it's the same thing. I cannot stand ghostwriting comms. It's not for me. I speak in bullet points. So like very similar. I did this with the previous woman, Marianne, who's our previous head of people. And I did this with Katie, who's the new chief people officer. And I had on like day one and I was like, Katie, she like had given some feedback on some of the comms from the team. And I was like, great. Like, can you give me, you send your own comms for like the first 5 days. And then from there, I will create this like basically with Notion AI, like a stone and tile, comms and style guide. And we did that. And then I trained it. I checked it with her and I was like, how do you feel about this? She was like, I wish I could always speak like that. I was like, great. Now all of our comms, they just like, it's like a 15-minute loop between something, a need, like here are the bullet points, and then rewrite it in terms of Katie's voice. And then she just goes, hit send. It's like, yeah, 100%. I love it every day. Every day. It takes 5 minutes to create.
I love that. Super tangible examples. I would love to know how you're getting all these emails because I do not want to read my emails at this point. So I would love that. Okay, so I want to move on to parts of the role that should not be outsourced to AI. I know that we are using AI a lot. We are using it to maybe take care of the things that feel repetitive or that we don't want to do anymore. But Kyle, we can start with you. What are parts of the chief of staff role that will never or should never be outsourced to AI?
It's a great question. Before I answer that, I want to have one take on the adoption question, because this is a framework that I heard from someone named Amanda Getz, who's a founder and former CMO, that has literally stuck in my brain for like 3 years. So it might be helpful for you all. It's called Kuba. And whenever you can't understand why someone isn't doing what you asked them to do, you go through this framework. K is no, which is just like, do they know what they're doing? Like, do they know how to do it? So if they're not using AI, like, do you actually know like how to get ChatGPT on your desktop? Like, I guarantee my mom has no clue how to do that. That's like step one. And then then once they're there, like, do they understand what your ask is? So they know how to use a tool. Are your ask very clear? Like, do they get what you want them to do? The B is for know, understand, believe. And that is, do they believe that what you're telling them to do is actually in the best interest of the company? Have you tied this to like a broader goal or driving revenue? Like, do they understand the impact that this is going to have for the organization? And the A is act. If someone knows like how to do it, they understand then your ask, they believe it's for the right thing for the organization, like there's nothing that's going to stop them from acting. I've actually found that to be very effective. You can be like, okay, is this an education problem? Is this a mapping problem that we haven't convinced them that this is powerful for the organization? So Kuba, hopefully that's helpful for you all. Your question about outsourcing, I guess my answer is like nothing. Like if AI can do what I do better than I can do it, then I'm going to let the AI do it and I'll just watch and chill. So I'm tempted to say like nothing. Obviously, like right now, AI can't do everything. So I think the things that are like higher up the value chain for a chief of staff is like deeply understanding the context of your business and the history of your business. So we're launching a new B2B vertical called Revenue Brew, which is for people that work in a revenue function at their company. So like go to market or account management or sales. And we did a process of like thinking about what industry or what function we should go into. And so I literally like went on Claude Pro was my first thing. And I was like, tell me like what I should do. And it gave a lot of answers. And even when I prompted it, like, no, we already have retail brew. So don't suggest like supply chain. That's a topic we talk about in retail brew. It still kind of would go to these topics that we already cover. And then based on conversations I've had with my boss, the CEO, and conversations I've had with our sales team, there's like a few things that I couldn't quite articulate to the AI that were like contextual about Morning Brew. And so I just don't think that's ever going to go away. So viewing AI as this like super, super, super smart colleague that doesn't quite work inside of Morning Brew the way you do it. And you can take it as like a really strong signal and then applying your layer of context to that, I found to be very helpful. I'm sure at some point you plug it into like every email and Google Drive and everything you have at your company, the AI is going to be like way smarter than us. So right now we're still valuable. Maybe in the future we're not.
Okay. I mean, if we can completely automate work, what are we going to do with our lives?
Yeah.
Marisa, same question. I would love to know, what are the things that you're feeling like Notion AI can't quite or shouldn't do?
It's like, I was thinking a bit about this, and I think to challenge, I'd say, like, I think there's a place where, and this is again, like, I spent a lot of time in the people land and then thinking about people, and like, there's like legal constraints. So we'll like pin the legal constraints for our legal counsel. Like, we have a whole guide of like thinking over there. So like pinning that of like, those are constraints that we have to work within. I think there's a piece around decision making and action where like when you're making decisions about people or when you're making like large one-way door decisions, that you always want like somebody who's in there that you can think deeply about the problem, can represent the trade-offs and can make a recommendation and can speak to it with fidelity. I think that all of those components can be supported like with AI, with other tooling, just like the way we would with research. Like it's just the way we would do research or articulate or like put together a paper or a memo. Like I still think it's integrated in that way. But when it comes down to one-way door decisions involving people that have action, that have like legal constraints, I think like humans are going to be always involved in that to some degree.
Yeah, and honestly, just piggybacking off that, that's perfect. When I was like thinking about this question, it really is thinking. I think in a lot of ways we are very tempted, especially I would say in just general life, to treat ChatGPT like it's this like crystal ball. And most of the time it does do that, you know, and it gives you a structure, it gives you like a container. But I fear for what will happen to us if we stop thinking as like a race, you know, as like the human race. And so I do think that what Kyle said was also accurate, right? I think there are certain things, if you treat AI like a silver bullet for like all of your problems with culture, with raising capital, with like all of these things that are very nuanced, like Marisa was saying, these one-way doors. I would say that ChatGPT does not have currently that competency. So an example that I can think of top of mind right now, for instance, we were starting to test out the Apollo AI, insights feature that they launched maybe like in the last month or something like that, that like really mimics Gong essentially. And so that's like a bit, we use Apollo essentially for our sales kind of like sourcing tool, et cetera. But like, what we noticed about the call is that if you weren't in the call, because people in construction have a very interesting tone of voice, they have a very interesting kind of perspective, the way that they say things. A lot of these people are in the Southeast. So there are certain nuances like culturally that I don't think that the like GPT has been really trained on. Like I feel like GPT is trained on a bunch of like very sophisticated New Yorkers and like San Francisco techies, which makes sense, right? But what we found is like a lot of the things that were just completely like, wow, I'm so in love with this product. It's so cool. It's going to make recruiting so much faster for us. Like this is like a legendary way to like blah, 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 like whatever. But it popped up as objections. And so that was very interesting. And so again, like I think the application here isn't like, oh my gosh, AI will definitely, I do think that it's going to continue to be smarter as it gets trained on more languages, understands cultural nuances, et cetera. I tried to talk to ChatGPT in Bahasa Indonesia, which is my second, my actual first language. And it was honestly pretty smart. But I do think that the big thing is anything related to people, I would definitely agree. If you're going to try to just fully make a board deck fundraising a story based on what ChatGPT says, we have to remember that everybody else has the same exact tool that you have access to. So if you can't keep a sharp mind and you cannot differentiate the way that you work, the way that you operate, the way that your company positions itself, oh, you're SOL. You better like figure out how to level yourself up, because I do think that that is a big conversation around like AI ethics, safety that we should be mindful of, is that like never think that there is this one catch-all tool that will replace all your thinking, because just think about the implications. Like I'm not trying to live in a Terminator world, guys. All right. So I'm not for that. So think with the AI, but think for yourself first. I would probably challenge everybody to do that here first.
And just to provide more nuance, I also am anti-Terminator. I want to go on record of that. I don't think
say nothing, Kyle.
I don't think that right now, like we could even outsource everything to AI. It's just not that good. I just think I don't know what the world is going to look like in 15 or 20 and 30 years. And I think saying like we would never outsource this to AI now, that might feel right now. It could be like actually wrong in the future. And I'm thinking of like in second grade reading that Google was developing driverless cars and being like, no fucking way. Would we ever let a car just drive around with AI? And now you look at Waymo, and the safety of an AI-driven car tends to be safer than a human. There's like always going to be these fringe cases, but in some ways, the ethical thing is actually to let the robots drive us, because they don't get tired. They don't make silly mistakes that humans do for the most part. Like they're safer. So I just think it's very interesting that in the future, we actually might have things that we consider never robots cannot do that end up delivering better, more equitable, and more fair results for us if a robot does it.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. So I'm going to have one more question before we go into one of my favorite hot takes round is. But I know we're talking about 10 to 20, 30 years in the future. We don't know what AI is going to look like then. But Rachel, I'm going to ask you to predict 6 months into the future. Where do you see your company further adopting AI, or even yourself further adopting AI in your workflows?
I will talk about myself first, and I think it's something that I would want all of our employees at our company to adopt, but it's something that I actually tried recently. And as you can probably tell, I'm like very tactical when it comes to kind of advice of how to use AI. And so the prompt that I actually recently tried was actually, how do I use ChatGPT for my personal development? And so it's 3 steps really, and anyone, whether you're a chief of staff today or want to be a chief of staff, can use this. The first thing I asked it to do, and you probably have seen it on some Twitter or X memes, but you ask it to actually, based off of all your ChatGPT or LLM of choice, to analyze you, psychoanalyze you. And if you want like a hint of funniness, you would ask it to roast you as well. And so that output, honestly, like I've never felt so seen in my life. It is very scary how much it knows. And I did it on my work GPT. And so it was very, very scary. And like basically also pumped me up at the end after it roasted me, was just like, don't worry, you're a really good chief of staff. So I really appreciated that. So that's the first step. The second step after that is actually to ask it to be an executive coach for you so that in a year's time, you can 10x your leadership style. And like, this is something that I'm constantly trying to do, because if any of you are at hyperscaling startups, and like, I know that I was talking to Stacy right before this, like our startup has changed so much since I joined in 2023 in December, that I want to make sure that I keep up myself with the pace of the company. And I honestly am using AI so that I can actually train myself to become a better leader, to talk better, to interact with anybody in a difficult situation better. And like that honestly was really helpful. Like these are 10 focus areas and like an action plan for the next year that you can actually take. And then this third step is, if you want to feel even more seen, is I actually took my performance review from the last time and I had to ingest it. And so in any sort of conversation that I have with the GPT from now on, it actually at the end like gives me feedback on how to make it better and if I'm aligned with what was stated in my performance review. And so I loved that. I like love learning and leveling myself up. And that's something that I'm trying to understand, like, how do I actually integrate with the people team? And then, or the people team is me, really, at Wagmo, but with me at Wagmo, and then also throughout our employee base too, because I would love if everyone actually used it in a way that actually can help them become better employees, better teammates for each other, so that we can actually show up better for one another.
That's really incredible. That's an incredible framework. I'm going to go home and do that too.
100%.
And I'm going to have to ask somebody to give me a performance review so I can also have ChatGPT ingest it. So Marisa, same question here. What do you see coming down the pike for Notion?
Yeah, I'd say, and I think you get a gold star.
Thank you.
Good job. You get a gold star. I think that the way that we're thinking about this is how do we thoughtfully incorporate this throughout the employee life cycle as it makes sense? And that's like to the point we had earlier, is like, when does it make sense? When does it like independently like take out the hype, like infuse the learning and curiosity so that you get more folks to be more intrinsically motivated in in the gold star end of the distribution in terms of usage. Because if you listen to what Rachel expressed, that was all self-driven, and like that's fabulous. Not everyone has that desire innately and that like internal motivation. So that's why we're like leaning into the curiosity a bit. But in 6 months from now, it'll be in part of every single part of the employee life cycle. That includes recruiting, questions that we use in recruiting. We're actively rethinking our recruiting process for technical roles and like rethinking how do we, and it's actually a really fun debate with our engineers. If there's any engineers who are from Notion, it's like really hot topic. It's like, what does that interview look like now? And how does it change? So it'll start there, infuse throughout like the learning component, onboarding, active usage, performance reviews, performance management, difficult conversations, like every single piece is how we've thought about it in like more of a methodical way. And like, that's what we're executing on right now. And I'd say like 6 months from now, I will get a gold star if like that ships.
I'm sure you already have a gold star.
Oh, I'd say like
Absolutely.
silver. I'd say that's what it is. It's like 6 months we'll see. And sometimes it's like, it depends how it lands. It depends how thoughtful we are. It depends on how much like chaos we say. By starting with a vague statement, it's like, hey, we really want to infuse this. We're going to start rethinking like recruiting, for example, and like the questions we ask and inviting people in. I think that's a huge piece. It's like inviting people in. Are you passionate about this? Do you have curiosities? Do you think this is a terrible idea? Amazing. Welcome to the working group. Like we want a spectrum of perspectives as well. It's not people who are super A forwards. In fact, we very much are purposely thinking about having people in the working group that have dissenting points of view. And somebody even went up to me. They were like, Marisa, like I got tagged for this. Like, I don't really think this is a good idea. Do you think that's okay? And I was like, yeah, please be vocal. Like we want a good answer. We don't want like a dogmatic answer. We want the best answer.
Amazing. So we're going to move into the last section of our panel. This is what I like to call the hot take section. I'm going to give you a statement and you just answer true, false, no further explanation. We do have half an hour after this panel, so you can ask them to expound on their answers there. But right now, just true, false. I'm going to start here with Stacy. We'll go back and forth. All right. First, hot take. Chiefs of staff are always generalists.
True.
False.
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 All right, we're going to come back around this way. Kyle, the chief of staff role is a fad title.
False.
Yeah, false.
False.
False?
All right. Next one, the chief of staff and principal have to work in office in person together.
True.
True.
False.
False.
Okay. Chiefs of staff should eventually graduate into a functional role.
False.
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 And I did graduate, but I'm still, I would say false still.
Okay. Kyle, bring us home here. The chief of staff role will be made obsolete by AI.
Well, I kind of just said that in my previous answer. But, yeah, I know. I got to say true now. But no, I think generally, I think false.
Yeah, false.
False as well.
False.
Amazing. Give it up for our panelists.
Give it up for Clara. Give it up for
Yeah. Woo.
We do have a little bit of time for questions. So if you have a question, I can come around and give you the mic, or maybe if you are able to make it down the aisle here or on the side, you can get to the mic a little faster. Anybody have any questions for our panelists? Oh my gosh, you were so comprehensive. Nobody has a question? Okay.
So I think, Rachel, you talked about building and training GPT on company data and things like that to get insights. I guess I'm going like a step, before that. Does that indicate you have a lot of confidence in the data? Because a lot of times that's, a problem when at least you have clients that, okay, we have GPT, but our data, we, have low confidence or reliance on that. So how do you sort of, manage that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to bucket into two groups. And so when I talk about like the GPTs that I've trained on like brand voice and our Christy, the CEO's voice, it is really good at that. And so literally what I take is like past emails to grok her personality, and our brand voice is actually trained basically from her, or like we've wrote it from her. And so in that way, it's more simple. But then another example that I can share is I use GPTs a lot for actually investor updates. And I would say at first that it is like a Wagmo contained system. And so it's not like just living in the wild out there. I do not recommend that to anybody, but I will give it like a few bullet points of the things that I wanted to highlight. And I always check to make sure that the output is correct, because I cannot tell you how many times it hallucinates and tells me like 99% of humans out there are pet owners. And I'm like, I would love that, but it's actually 70%. And so always check your answers. And when it comes to actually piecing together different data points, that's where I think it's getting better. Like if I scroll back to a question before, one thing that I wish like the LLMs and GPTs can do better is actually connect dots. Because right now, the reality is, unless you're using Notion through and through, you have so many different systems for your OKRs, for your roadmap, for your like Slack messages, for your weekly meetings. And I still need to like input the dots in order for them to connect, and then review that to make sure it actually like surfaced the real insights, and then like flagged what to celebrate, what are risks, because sometimes it can make things up.
Thank you so much. This is so relevant for me. So Chief of Staff, in 2 weeks, we're hosting our quarterly strategic meeting, and I've been asked to host a 75-minute workshop on getting the team excited about using AI. And so everything you guys are saying is so helpful in that we have some people who are like hesitantly optimistic, and then we have some people who are like, I hate this. Why are you making me do this? Can we please break for lunch? I love what you're saying about curiosity and play. Can you share some of the ways that, like, what does that look like for you all and trying to encourage that?
100%. I gave my phone away so it wouldn't disrupt, but I'll pull up the page if you want. I can give you the example, but there's a spectrum. Like, think of the spectrum of like, I think like as silly as possible. Like you can do the personality face, you can do the picture upload and have it like from ChatGPT, like turn it into like a Ghibli Studio style picture. Like there's like, I think about like the things that's like really open up your mind and that sense of play. We have a group of friends here. Our BD team had an offsite where they locked themselves in a room for 90 minutes and they went on Replay, and their goal was to just like build a game. There's so many options to have fun. I think more around like the people who are detractors, like what's important to them. Is it their family? Is it like, what do they like to read? Like I'd almost like try to personalize it to them a bit more and try to understand what are the things they like. And then how can I kind of like open up their mind in that context? Like if they really like science fiction, any King Killer Chronicle followers here, Patrick Rothfuss has not come out with a third book, and I don't know if he ever will. So somebody said this to me the other day. They're like, what if you asked ChatGPT to like come up with the plot line of the third book of the King Killer Chronicles? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, like huge science fiction nerd over here. Like there's like, so to close this out, I would emphasize on the play. I'd start with the personal side on the consumer side, and I'd try to target it to the people in the room and what they care about, and then have a diversity of options. So you can have like transformation, you have net new generation, you can have analysis, and try to like pick something in each of those buckets to help demonstrate the diversity of what can be done.
And just to add one thing to that, because I think that's such a great answer, and I loved your part about what matters to the detractors. And so we did this massive AI survey for the entire organization, and probably to like no one's surprise, I'll be a bit hyperbolic here, but like journalists hate AI. They hate AI, and like thank God for them. Like we need people that are cynical and investigating the powers that be. And we employ a lot of journalists at Morning Brew Inc. that do amazing work. And so when we talk about AI, like they hate it. They think it's hallucinates all the time. They think it's an abuse of power, like and all like very fair things that can be debated in the public sphere. But then what really I think turned for some of them is finding use cases that other journalists were using that allowed them to achieve their goals of amazing journalism. So ProPublica was using AI to comb government data sets that would take a human like hundreds and hundreds of years. The AI can do it in like 10 seconds. And so your story now can be more impactful. You can investigate the powers that be more deeply with this as your co-pilot. That's very animating. So I think your thing about like, why, like what do the detractors care about is really important. And if AI can help them do that, they'll come around to it.
Sorry, I have one last thing to say. If any of your team members hate doing something, that should be the motivation for them to automate it. I actually just had this convo with one of our engineers, and he had just adopted Cursor, which is basically one of the only apparently like vibe coding tool that works right now for him. But it's like, if you hate doing it, AI can probably fix it for you. So that's probably a good way to start survey. What do you hate doing in your job?
We're talking a lot about the AI tools, and I know it's like the AI tools for sure can improve the operational efficiency and for the chief of staff. But there's one thing I think AI cannot be replaced is effective communication as a chief of staff. So I want to understand, or it's like I want to know, it's like can you share one example of or your life experience of the effective communication? And also, so I want to know from your advice, like for international candidates, it's like how we can bridge the communication gap if it want to be the chief of staff role in the US companies. Thank you.
I
Yeah,
can,
two
I can
questions.
start off. So I actually don't know if that's correct. I would say I think actually has done a lot for me personally. I can only talk my personal experience of elevating my communication. And I think actually the major feature unlocked is voice to text. And if you haven't tried it already, like you can talk into the LLM or you can talk into Superhuman, and then it changes your gibberish into like a beautiful email or a beautiful talk track. And honestly, like because chief of staffs, as we all know, like we're running between meetings and meetings, like I do not have time a lot of cases to actually do like a wonderful, like eloquent script that's like on this topic. But then in 5 minutes, it can give me that script and it's like good enough to make me run. In other times where I have more time, like that would be great to actually use me a little bit more plus ChatGPT to create that script. But I think that's a way that I've actually elevated my own communication style is talking to it, giving it the prompt like, hey, I want to sound more like a chief of staff that's been in their career for 10 years. And like the message that I want to come across is XYZ, and my audience is this type of person, and they care about A, B, and C. And like that usually gets you to a good starting place. What I would say is like, I always ask it to actually output in terms of bullets, because you still want a bit of your personality in it. And I find that if it just outputs a script, you are just going to sound like a robot. In terms of your second question, I think that's like an interesting area. And I personally, maybe others can speak to it because I only unfortunately speak English. And so learning another language like is something that I want to do. And I want to learn Mandarin for my husband, but like, he's like, use ChatGPT. And I honestly haven't started with it yet, but I'll pass it to another person to talk about your second piece.
Well, I am an international student, so we do exist. I was born and raised in Indonesia. So I just want to clarify, is the question specifically Oh, verbal communication. Okay. Well, I think that prompt engineering ChatGPT to actually teach you a lot of a few things, I guess. The first one is OpenAI came out with their academy essentially that's like completely free for anybody to use. So if you are like me and you're like, oh my God, I am an AI dummy, please someone teach me something about prompt engineering because this is like very true about the tech scene. Once there's like a term that's like buzzy, for a while it was like founder mode because, everyone thought that that was so cool. Now it's like prompt engineering. And then people are like too shy or too like, weird to ask, like, what does that actually mean? And so I think a big part of discovery with OpenAI and ChatGPT in general is that now there are a ton of resources for us to be smarter about the way that we interact with ChatGPT. So when Rachel talks a lot about she created a container or like several prompts for her team to be able to do something, we can do that also for our personal life. Honestly, I feel like you're a great person to speak about this because you have used ChatGPT in such a personal way that has inspired me personally to also go do that.
I'm using it for my wedding planning.
Oh,
I can
perfect.
talk about that
I'm
to
about to do
everybody.
it for how do I balance more of my motherhood with parenthood with chief of staff roles and things like that. But I think for the specific communication barrier, I would say that for text, emails and things like that, it's much easier, but I would be interested. Ask ChatGPT to create a curriculum for you for communication from Mandarin to English. What are the basic things that you would need to know for a working capacity? And then prompting it to be for a chief of staff, what are some core communication styles, messaging, core competencies that would be helpful for me to learn now for a year? I mean, it worked for her. You created a personal development plan for a year and not true to tested, but I would assume that it would work.
She 100% is getting a 10 out of 10.
100%, 10 out of 10 gold star. So I don't know if that helped, but I'm
Embarrassed.
very happy to connect with you about international student life or international life in general.
Amazing. Well, that brings us to the end of our panel. One more time, please give it up for our panelists.